Okay, first things first, what is Nintendo Pocket Football Club? Well, as the name suggests, it is a football game, but unlike the mainstream football games such as FIFA and PES, eFootball, the main aspect of the gameplay doesn't involve you controlling any of the players. Instead, the best game to compare this to would be Football Manager. The game starts off by introducing you as the manager of a club that is currently in the lowest domestic league, with the main incentive being to get your team to promote and reach Pro League 1. This is the game's version of the Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, etc., the top division, and to eventually win the illustrious treble, which consists of the league title, the Federation Cup, which is the FA Cup equivalent in this game, and the World Club Classic, which is the equivalent to the World Club Cup in real life. Okay, I need to get one thing straight. In order for you to even qualify for the World Club Classic, you first need to win the European Challenge Cup, which is a cup itself. In fact, it's this game's equivalent of the Champions League. So, when the game recognises that you won the treble, which is the league title, the Federation Cup, and the World Club Classic, you technically won the quadruple. But the game never mentions this. They don't even mention the word quadruple ever. Right, hopefully that's all cleared now. This does make me irrationally angry, because it does kind of undermine the fact that you did win another cup before winning the World Club Classic. Anyway, as I mentioned before, since the main gameplay doesn't involve you controlling the players, the gameplay will most likely be described to as similar would be Football Manager. However, I personally have never even touched a single Football Manager game, but based on one review I've watched for Nintendo Pocket Football Club by Nintendo Life, it is very apparent that Football Manager is incredibly detailed and in-depth. However, Nintendo Pocket Football Club really leans towards a more very stripped down version of this type of gameplay. It keeps the core concept of Football Manager, but it keeps it simple. And simple is a concept that they repeat over and over again. For example, the signing of players is very simple. The only requirement is that the player is available on the transfer market, and that you can afford them. Hopefully. No need for scouting, no need to alter your bid, the player will stay at the value in the market. And the decision is based on a small sentence they give on how happy they are at the club, or how willing they are because maybe they've been stuck on the bench for a while. As expected for the match gameplay, you have complete freedom of who you choose to be on the starting lineup and what type of formation to use. The tactics during the game are, again, very simple. It's segmented into 3 areas. First off, the zone, where your players are positioned on the field. You can spread them along the field to promote passing across to each other, or you can tighten the formation to improve chances of your team stealing the ball back from the opposition. Attack versus defense. This is quite self-explanatory. You can choose how they play, either always looking to score, always defending but waiting for chances, also known as parking the bus, or a balanced style of play, just a mixture of the two. Then marking, where you can choose up to 3 players for your players to mark, who you think are the main threats on the opposition team. In game, they're signified with a star above their heads to show you where they are. Now, when it comes to training players, again, as this game is very simplified, characteristics of each player is split into 7 stats, most of which are quite self-explanatory. Those are kicking, speed, stamina, technique, toughness, jumping, and willpower. Of course, one of the more obvious ones, kicking, that determines how well a player shoots and passes, so kicking is pretty much a must-have for the majority of the players in the game. Speed is how fast the player moves. Of course, this is much more useful for certain positions, such as wingers and strikers. Stamina determines how long a player can be on the pitch before they start being too tired. Technique, okay, this is where it starts to become a bit more broad. This is how well a player controls the ball, including trapping the ball with a good touch, skill moves, and how well a player tackles. Toughness determines how strong the tackle is, as well as how likely they are to get injured during a game. Outside of a match, it affects how quickly a player recovers from fatigue. Jumping, this one's quite self-explanatory, and it is a very essential aspect for goalkeepers, otherwise they'd be pretty useless against a shot that's slightly high. Now, willpower is the weirdest one. This determines how well a player performs while playing at away games. Also, oddly enough, during tackles, it also determines how likely the player is to receive a yellow card. So, the higher the willpower, the less likely they are to get a yellow card. It should also be mentioned, each week the players also passively gain points towards each of these stats. However, in order to speed up this process, the game provides training cards which improves different attributes of the player's game, such as their passing or shooting, as well as adding points towards any of the 7 stats as listed before. These said cards are found during games, and the frequency of finding these cards is based on how well the team is performing. If your team is doing well and not making many mistakes, you will receive less cards. On the flip side, if your team is performing badly, especially in certain areas, the game will give you cards to improve in those specific areas. One thing to mention, the game isn't perfect when it comes to this. Sometimes you can have an absolute deadlock of a game and you're stuck at 0-0 during the entire match, and the game doesn't give you any cards. Other times, the game provides you with some perfect timing to some of the cards appearing, which adds a lot of comedic effect. Mikhail's, oh, nice bit of turn there. We have so many players in the box. If he shoots, I'll be real mad. Additionally, the cards can be combined to give special card combos, which can consist of 2 or 3 cards that can give you better stats gains, a special ability, or even both. Oh yeah, I should also mention that some mechanics are only possible with the use of cards. What do I mean by that? Well, you can only assign a specific player as a captain using a card combo. When players are trained enough, they may gain a player type. This determines what type of decisions the player makes when they're on or off the ball. Overall, there are 12 player types available in the game. Again, most of these are quite obvious in what they do to the player. Balanced is the most basic type that every player starts off with, and as it suggests, the player doesn't focus on anything specific when it comes to attacking or defending. Dynamo, despite its name, is just a version of Balanced where they swap quickly between attacking and defending. Worker is a defensive player, but joins in on the offense whenever there's a chance to. Maverick, another defensive player, but not afraid to move forward and have an attempt on goal. Backup, yet another defensive player type, however this one focuses more on covering another player whenever they move out of position and fills in for them. Markers, their main focus is, well, marking players, and they will try to intercept the ball whenever possible. Stopper, my personal favourite, they will try to block the shots using their body, and are probably one of the more proactive types for the defenders. Seeker, when reading this description it wasn't quite helpful for me, but my interpretation is that they mainly focus on pressing whoever is currently on the ball rather than marking players who are off the ball. Chancer, okay, onto now some of the more offensive types. Chancer mainly focuses on moving forward to look for goals. Hang on, wait. I just realised the screenshot on the actual game shows a goalkeeper having a Chancer type. Sprinter, they move fast. Explorer, a personal favourite for midfielders. They find space to receive a pass as well as look for opportunities to make a pass themselves. Creator, basically the same type as Explorer, but the focus is more towards actually creating the space rather than going for the passes themselves. In order to obtain most of these types, you would need to use the training cards which relate to those descriptions. For example, Sprinter is probably one of the easiest ones to train since most of the cards that relate to running or sprinting clearly say that on the card itself. Also, they also accept dribbling cards as a form of running and sprinting. Defenders, honestly, you don't need to be picky with most of the types. In my opinion, as long as you have any one of the defensive types that are listed, you should be fine. Again, this can be done with card combos that give some sort of hints that it is defensive, such as the chain or brick wall. However, to this day, I cannot consistently train a player to become either a worker, maverick, or creator type. I'm not sure exactly how it works, this is purely based on assumption, but there is a graph for managers where you can see how aggressive they are, how defensive they are, how flexible they are, and how strict they are. And I'm assuming the cards work in that way too. Since some of the defensive types also have a hint of attacking capabilities, I'm assuming that you need to have a good mix of cards which allows you to become either a maverick, a stopper, something like that, and I do not know what the correct mix is for worker, maverick, or creator, sadly. If anyone does know, put them in the comments and I'll see whether it does work or not, but as of now I still do not know how to get any of those types consistently. An additional caveat of the card training is that how much a player gains from those points given by the cards is actually determined by their potential. Potential is shown underneath their stats and is showing which direction they're going towards by the arrows of the bars. The lower the potential bar is, the less they gain from the cards. Whenever you buy a player, they will always either start off with full potential bar or a bar that's moving towards full potential. So whenever they do reach full potential, they gain the most out of the points given by the cards. However, as you begin to train players more and more, the progress of the potential bar speeds up. And then, once it has reached full potential, the only direction it can go is the opposite direction, meaning they will start having lower potential and are then a less optimal choice to give cards to, since they will gain less from said cards. This is Nintendo Pocket Football Club's way of implementing age into the game, because once their potential bar is completely depleted, their stats themselves will start to deteriorate. Finally, it wouldn't be a management game if you actually didn't have a way to lose. In this game, your performance is shown by how well the fans receive you as a manager. This is shown by your backing stat. This is essentially a health bar for you. It's a percentage to show how satisfied the supporters of the club are. The amount of backing you gain is determined based on the result and the context of the result. For example, if you win against a team that is in a higher division than you, you will gain significantly more backing than if you win against a team that's in the same or a lower division compared to yourself. But in general, winning will boost your backing, losing will drop your backing, and drawing, it can give you a mixture of either gaining a moderate amount, losing a moderate amount, or not having any change to your backing result. Again, this completely depends on the context of the game itself. And once it reaches 0, you essentially lose the game. Personally, I've never had this happen to me, even during a season where I've performed absolutely atrociously. The amount you lose isn't really that much. So I wouldn't worry too much about reaching 0, unless you are purposely trying to do that, then good luck, I guess. Now that we've explained the game itself, let's talk about the history of the game. It should be noted that Nintendo Pocket Football Club isn't the first edition of this game. The company that made the game, ParityBit, actually had a game which acted as the predecessor to Nintendo Pocket Football Club, in the name of CalcioBit, released on the Game Boy Advance in 2006. The name itself derives from the Italian translation of soccer, not football, sorry, and the Japanese word chobito, meaning to play for a little bit. Having a look at some of the gameplay, you can clearly see some of the similarities just with the still image already. However, with the small 6-minute clip I found on YouTube, some differences show. One such example is that the throw-ins are actually labelled as throw-ins. For some reason, that was just completely gone by the time it goes into Nintendo Pocket Football Club. Another one is that the Game Boy Advance only had one screen, so when checking the stats of your players, it would have to pause the game while you scrolled across each and every one of them. Apart from that, most of the gameplay seems to follow the exact same pattern, even including some very questionable decisions made by your own team, such as this goalkeeper teetering between going to clear the ball and actually going back to defend the goal, with the addition of their own defenders pushing the goalkeeper further away from the goal, which ultimately leads to another goal being conceded. Furthermore, as you can see from this gameplay footage and the screenshots of the wiki entry, the game was only ever released to Japan, and few English reviews were made, roughly giving the game a mediocre 5 out of 10. Then, fast forward to 2012, and ParityBit have made a sequel, still carrying the name of CalcioBit, this time for the Nintendo 3DS. But it took a further 2 years before Europe actually received a localization in the name of Nintendo Pocket Football Club. After digging around YouTube for a bit, I found a trailer for this game which showcases the basic attributes of the game itself. One of which includes a visual representation of how the potential of a player drops as the seasons go by. From the trailer, there are two visual elements I noticed were quite different to the current version of the game. The card visuals have a different art style, and the faces— oh my jeez! Whoa, okay, wait, get rid of that now. Thank you. Right, the art style of the players' faces was changed from a more realistic design to pixel art, and I think I speak for all of us that that was a very good decision to move away from the realistic faces and more of the pixel art style. While I was searching for more information about Nintendo Pocket Football Club, I came across a very interesting interview between the creator of the game, Hiroyuki Sonobe, and the late Satoru Iwata. In the interview, they talk about brief topics such as the motivations for making the game, and how past experience with similar games affected the production of Nintendo Pocket Football Club. Previously, Sonobe had made a baseball and horse racing game of a similar vein to Nintendo Pocket Football Club. The baseball game being called Best Pro Play Baseball, and the horse racing game being called Derby Stallion. Oh yeah, I should mention that when I was looking for gameplay footage of Derby Stallion, I couldn't really find anything, but I did find something else that was interesting. A horse girl movie starring Zac Efron. I've not seen it, nor do I plan on seeing it, but apparently there is a 20-minute video discussing some of the, well, merits of the film, I guess. I might watch it afterwards, I don't know. Anyway, the main point of interest for both of those games was the fact that you're watching the computers play out the game themselves, rather than you doing it yourself. Part of the interview states that Shinobi had based this on a childhood experience of going to the arcade, not having enough coins to play, and then having to watch other people play instead. So, originally, when applying this to Derby Stallion, Shinobi didn't want to cater towards the niche aspects of the sport. Instead, they wanted to take the complexities of the sport themselves and simplify it for the game. A concept which has been attributed to Best Pro Play Baseball and later on Nintendo Pockets Football Club. So, when the Japanese Football League, also known as the J-League, had started, interest in football within Japan had increased and a football version of Best Pro Play Baseball was being asked for. However, Shinobi explained that they had to consider the differences between football and baseball before they started to make the game. Initially, it was quickly recognised that the two sports were enjoyable for completely different reasons. Then, from a gameplay point of view, the stats attached to players are two different dimensions. Where the success of a player in baseball is dependent on their stats on individual performance, such as batting percentages, ability to capture bases, etc.
The statistical analysis. It's so beautiful.
Comparatively, football's success stats for a player at the core base is how many goals a player would score, or how many assists they would manage to create during a game. Bear in mind, I am aware that there are other individual stats that would determine how well a player performs. Such stats would include passes completed, tackles won, distance ran, etc. But remember that the core concept of these games is to simplify as much of the original sport as possible without actually ruining the identity of the sport itself. Instead, at some point in the production, they decided to use the 7 individual stats that were mentioned beforehand to showcase the player's ability to either score goals, assist, or stop the conceding of goals. Then, going on to the gameplay, the aspect of condensing a 90-minute match into a 10-minute one was to increase the intensity of each game, so that the action in the game would ebb and flow as the game progresses. For example, one team could miss a chance to have a shot on goal, only for the other team to recuperate and launch a counter-attack. During the interview, it was also explicitly mentioned that Shinobi never actually wanted the option to skip a match and just see the results. The game itself, however, does have this option, but most of the time it does cause your team to lose regardless of how well you're winning. In my opinion, this decision was probably made because the core gameplay is watching the match itself. If you take that away, you take away half the game entirely. Additionally, I think it's a really good decision to do this because it really shows how much you had to struggle for the win, and it says a lot more to actually watch the full match in its entirety than just to see the final score of, let's say, 1-0 or 2-1 without knowing the context of how those goals were produced. One more thing I found quite fun in the interview was the fact that the development for Nintendo Pocket Football Club had actually started in 2006. And because of this, it was originally meant to be developed for the Nintendo DS rather than the 3DS. Personally, I would recommend that you do go ahead and read the interview yourself. It is quite a short read, to be honest, and it does give a lot of insight about how they made the game and what they thought about their previous games before they made Nintendo Pocket Football Club. As mentioned previously in the interview, Shinobi used the childhood experience of going to the arcade as a form of inspiration for making these type of games. Personally speaking, Nintendo Pocket Football Club does really remind me of my own childhood when it came to watching football itself. During which the only time I could ever watch football was during Match of the Day. Now, my childhood took place in the mid-2000s, and at this point there were no streaming services, there were no apps that could tell me the score. I had absolutely nothing. So whenever I did watch those matches on TV, I had absolutely no idea what the score was, or what it could have been. Well, that's kind of a lie. There was a TV program called Final Score, if I remember correctly, and that gave real-time updates to the matches. However, there was no footage of the matches themselves, it was just the scores set up just so you could read as the games were progressing. So during those times when the Premier League was on, the only time I could ever watch football was to watch those condensed highlights on Match of the Day. The only other time I could actually watch any full matches was when the World Cup was on, but even then I would still watch the highlights of it all again, purely because they did condense all the content into just a couple of minutes, and that is by far one of the reasons why Nintendo Pocket Football Club really speaks out to me. Nintendo Pocket Football Club at its core doesn't really have any difficulty settings. Instead, the game follows a progression system which has you start from essentially the Sunday League, and at this point the game is at very easy. In fact, I honestly feel like one of the teams, Earls Athletic, is really programmed to be absolutely awful. I'll show you an image that I took of a player that they purchased for 1,100 coins if I remember correctly, and they have possibly the worst stats possible for that caliber of player. At this point in the game, it feels like it just wants you to get used to the mechanics. During the first 3 weeks of the game, they throw in standard aspects of the game such as what decisions you, as a manager, have an influence over, the usage of training cards, and the type of tactics you have available to you. Then, once you've settled in and understand the mechanics, as well as built some confidence, the game wants to kick away that confidence and puts you into an official match against a Pro League 1 team, Rex Rovers. Look at that. Yep, look at that percentage. Wow, you're gonna love this game. So, while you're in the beginner league, hopefully you should be able to learn the concepts of the game and learn your own playstyle. At some point, hopefully, you should be able to get first in the beginner league and promote yourself into the advanced league. Since you've reached the advanced league, the amount of games in the regular season actually double. Normally, in the beginner league, you face off against the team home and away. In the advanced league, you face off against them home and away twice, so you have to play against the teams at least 4 times during that season. On top of that, also the opponents get harder. Good luck. By this time, however, some of your players on your team should be receiving their player types, such as the sprinter or chancer types, and that should be a big boost to how useful your team should be. So, overall, the amount of games have doubled, the amount of rest weeks have reduced, and the teams you're going against are a bit harder. Despite all that though, the game is still relatively easy, but not very easy, so it bumps it up to around about the easy difficulty. Teams are manageable, while also still giving you a hard time, especially if you haven't found the right players for your team yet. Okay, Pro League 2. So, just like the Advanced League, you have to play against every single team there 4 times. That is to say, home and away, twice during a season. The key difference here being, not only are there 6 teams now, there's 8 teams. Not only that, they are much harder to deal with. So because of this manages to actually push the game from easy difficulty to hard difficulty almost immediately. Also, considering the fact that there are 8 teams instead, this makes the Pro League 2 regular season the longest regular season out of all of the domestic leagues. So, because you're playing way more games, understandably, you'd have less rest weeks. So it's harder to balance your team in terms of fatigue and actually winning games. It's at this point, in this league, that building your correct team is very important, especially if you don't want to get relegated. This is the part of the game where I struggle a lot. It's really hard to try and actually build a team during the first season of Pro League 2 and then get the ball rolling from there. However, the upside to this is, as you spend a couple of seasons in Pro League 2, you start to learn the playstyles of the opposition team. Also, because the opponents are much harder, you also start to find out what kind of playstyle really suits your style. For me, I like to play really aggressive football where the main focus is pressing the players on the opposite side, so I like to put most of the players on the opposition side while most of my defenders are in ours instead. Because of this, as you learn how to play against the opposite teams, the difficulty drops down slightly from hard difficulty to medium, whilst you're still trying to get used to the playstyle. And then, once you've slowly solidified your place in Pro League 2 and you start managing to climb, your next objective is to get to the top 2 to get, hopefully, a promotion spot into Pro League 1 and actually reach the top division. The climb itself is also quite difficult. Just remember that if a team manages to promote from Pro League 2 to Pro League 1, conversely, a team from Pro League 1 has to demote to Pro League 2. So in the following season, you'd have to face up against your normal Pro League 2 opponents, as well as the fact that you have to go off against a Pro League 1 opponent who's been demoted to Pro League 2 instead. Then, once you do find yourself winning a spot in Pro League 1, the game then goes from hard difficulty again because it follows the same progression as it did for Pro League 2. You do have to spend a lot of time actually getting used to the other teams and their playstyles, and then finding a way to beat them. So yeah, overall, Pro League 2 and Pro League 1 are quite similar in the fact that number 1, you join, you get smashed into the ground. Number 2, you get used to the teams and their playstyles and you get better against them. And number 3, you start building more and more wins to the point that you can start contesting for top 2 finishes. Also, one better aspect of moving to Pro League 1 compared to staying in Pro League 2 is the fact that you're not stuck in a very long season. Yes, you are against more teams, in this case it is 12 compared to the 8 in Pro League 2, but it goes back to the original standard of having to play against each and every team, just home and away. But it's at this point, in my opinion at least, that the matches can be absolutely crazy. Pro League 1 is an absolute haven for ridiculous matches. Case in point, this clip I'm going to show you right now. Posting in, nice. To De Groot, could just cross it in, yes it does. And it's too simple to 1-1. Okay, get to it. Okay, good enough, good enough. Valent? No. Oh. Okay. Valent. Yes, but oh, no way. A red? Oh, okay. Okay. How? How did Palmer miss that one? Michaels? 4-3, come on. Oh, no. Oh, this is insane. What type of game is this? 5-4. Oh, there it is. There it is. Michaels? Oh. Miller? Oh, why? Why? Why would you aim at the keeper? Okay. Okay. There it is. There it is. Oh, finally. Finally. Okay, you're now in Pro League 1. Congratulations. So what do we do now? Well, the main goal now is to win the league itself, or to win a place in the European Challenge Cup, which is this game's equivalent of the Champions League. And from there you can start looking for positions to win the European Challenge Cup, to then further yourself to go onto the World Club Classic and win it there to hopefully win the treble for the season. I had a look at one of the teams we were facing, in this case I think it was Freewheelers, and a look at their budgets as well. Their grand total for their players tallied up to 123,700 coins. Meanwhile, the maximum budget we can get as the player is 120,000, and this is only attainable if you win the treble. Or the quadruple if you've followed my logic from before. On top of that, as if it doesn't get any worse, as the seasons pass you'll find out that some players will keep asking for pay rises as a response for performing well during the season, being on the team for a while, or the stats increasing quite significantly. Pair this with the fact that your budget actually has a limit, in this case 120,000, as mentioned before, and you'll find yourself making hard decisions such as getting rid of a brilliant player due to the fact that they're too expensive and you have to rebuild the team because of that. Honestly, the decision to limit how much you can get from the budget is both a good choice and a fair choice in my opinion. It stops you from being able to stomp the league purely because you can just buy the players to be able to stomp the league in the first place. And it essentially incentivizes the idea that you should probably develop the players rather than buying their talents straight up. Also, from the point of view that this is a game, it really doesn't make sense to be rewarded for losing out on the finals. But we all know that there are some real life examples which that doesn't happen and they get more money in order to try and win. The way promotion works is pretty interesting. In the first season, if you get first in the beginner league, you gain automatic promotion, which is understandable, you did earn that place. However, in the advanced league, when you win the title, instead of automatic promotion, you have to play a playoff match. The playoff match consists of you, the winner of the advanced league, and whoever was last in Pro League 2. So, in order to actually promote into Pro League 2, you need to prove that you are capable of beating a Pro League 2 team, which is really good in my opinion and really interesting because it shows that you actually have to win another match to essentially progress any further, and to make sure that you are capable of going into Pro League 2 you have to beat a Pro League 2 team. And then once you're in Pro League 2 there's two conditions you can meet in order for promotion. The first is whoever wins the title gains automatic promotion, however the team that gets placed second has to play a playoff match against the team that was second to last in Pro League 1. Honestly, this kind of promotion system makes sense to me. In this scenario, when you lock in second place, you win the opportunity to win a spot in the higher division. On the flip side, if you are getting relegated from Pro League 1, you have one last shining moment to show and prove that you do have the capabilities to stay in Pro League 1. If you're unable to prove this fact, well, it kind of shows that the Pro League 2 team deserved to be in Pro League 1, and you, the Pro League 1 team, deserve to be back in Pro League 2, sadly. Additionally, the progression of the game is also quite easy to follow. If you get promoted, you get a boost to your budget. Of course, the higher the division you promote into, the larger the boost is to your budget. Conversely, if you get relegated, you lose said boost to your budget, so the game punishes you for not being able to stay in your current league. The only thing that's slightly different when it comes to the boost to your budget would be when you're in Pro League 1. In Pro League 1, you get another small boost to your budget if you manage to land in the top 6 for the first time. After that, the next one is if you get into the top 2. Apart from that, I think in the European Challenge Cup, as long as you get second at the least in the European Challenge Cup, you get a boost to your budget. In the World Club Classic, I think you had to get into the semi-finals, I think. And the Federation Cup, which is the FA Cup equivalent in this game, you have to reach at least the quarterfinals in order to get some budget boost. Speaking of the Federation Cup and progression in the game, I found out that the placements you get in the Federation Cup initially, so the first round, is not actually random, it's set. And I'll show that with the images I have here. As you can see, we have all the teams there, and next to them, the position they were in last season. You can have a check at this in your own game, and the teams in those positions should correspond to where they were placed last season. So, this means your placement last season determines who you face off against in the first round of the Federation Cup for this season. So, some of you may have realised that if you finished in a high position last season, you face off against an easier opponent in the Federation Cup. Since we, Spider-Verse, managed to win the league last season, we get to go off against the second to last team in the Beginner League. The Beginner League being the worst division in the game. So this means that the game allows you to essentially snowball your advantage of getting a higher budget if you land at a very good spot in Pro League 1 or 2. Which in turn allows you to have a better time next season, and then so on and so forth. Because of this, the game essentially incentivizes that you finish at a high spot even if you don't manage to get a promotion spot or a European Challenge Cup spot. So if your team is currently in 4th and it is currently within reaching distance of 3rd, but you don't feel like getting it because you're out of a top 2 placement, still try to aim for 3rd so you get an easier placement in the Federation Cup next season. Just on a different note, when you start playing these games out and you are against teams of a higher quality and caliber, a lot of the time you will be stalling out the game for a draw. This is also the case for the European Challenge Cup finals and the World Club Classic, especially when it's your first time in those tournaments. And if that is the case, the game will then be decided by penalties, which is probably the most stressful 2 minutes of your life. Hello, me again. I'm just coming back here just to let you know that the music I was going to use for the montage is actually viable to be copyright struck. So in order to reduce the risk, I'll put the link down of what the music I was going to use as well as the timer so you can time it up. Or if you don't want to do that, I have put the video up separately on TikTok, which is just that montage. Anyway, have a good watch, I guess. Bye. That's the end of the game. It's 1-1. So overall to 2-2, it goes to penalties. But not like that's useful. Oh, of course he saves it. Okay, I thought I was gonna hit the bar. How? What? How did he save both? Wait, this guy has no energy. If he scores, this is rigged. Okay, it's not rigged. If he doesn't score this, I'll be real mad. I'm not mad. If they score, though, I'll be mad. Left. Oh, it went over. Left. Oh. Oh, Tester. Oh, this is a terrible set of penalties. Right. I I didn't know that could happen. What? Left. Oh, nice. Lovely. Wow, those were some terrible penalties. But we got the win. Much like how the game states that your players will become more adept when they play more matches with each other, you yourself will also need to understand certain niche aspects of the game in order to succeed further alongside your team. For example, as you play the game more, you'll find that your collection of cards and the card combos you unlocked will increase. You, eventually, will find yourself knowing some of the card combos from pure muscle memory, as well as the fact that the game tells you that you've already made a card combo using those specific cards before. As well as that, in my description of all the videos, I've also added a link in which one of my subscribers, Bricario, made the card generator. This gives a list of the card combos that are in the game, as well as adding a filter that shows what card combos can be made from the current ones you have available. Anyway, here are some of my favourite cards for each of the positions as shown. For goalkeeper, there's a couple of exclusive goalkeeper cards. Any of those will do fine, but defender, my main one I like to use is Iron Defense. For midfielders, I like passing mainly from midfielders, so use Velvet's Pass. And forwards, Open the Gate is a very solid option, especially if you want to make them a chancer. As you gain more experience with the cards that are available, you'll realise that some of the card combos just don't fit your style, or are absolutely useless. One of the best examples of this is the 3-card combo, No Luck Pass. Yes, it is a 3-card combo, and it does have its own animation, but that's all there is to it. It's just a glorified passing card with just a couple more steps, and the worst thing about it is that the animation is set, and the pass itself isn't even guaranteed to succeed. And again, it's useless, look at that! On the other hand, some cards feel almost mandatory for me when I'm building a team, such as Banana Shoot and Long Throw. These cards give another opportunity to score, which otherwise wouldn't be possible without these training cards being available to you. Of course, experience also helps you with understanding how certain aspects of the game works. One of the earliest pieces of information you're told that you can apply to your games is the fact that players with better willpower perform better at away games. So, when you find yourself playing at an away game and you're stuck between choosing 2 players of similar stats, if possible, choose the one which has the higher willpower. Sometimes when a player gets trained by using cards, it can speed up the potential bar, meaning they will reach full potential quicker and start deteriorating quicker. So whenever a player is chosen for the All-Star squad, it slows down the amount of time they have before they start losing their stats, and because of that, increases the amount of time you have to give cards to that players. So you can give more cards that have special abilities, and then once they're at full potential, give them cards that give more stats, maximizing the use of potential. On top of that, the requirements for the All-Star squad isn't really explained in the game, but it can be quite self-explanatory. Goalkeepers and defenders are chosen based on how few goals they concede. Well, hopefully. I'm saying this, but I'm pretty sure there were 2 seasons where my goalkeeper Salah wasn't chosen despite conceding the least amount of goals in the regular season. But to be fair, I think it also takes into account the European Challenge Cup and the World Club Classic, since players of those teams can also be chosen on the All-Star squad. Then midfielders and forwards are more based around their goals and assists they create during the season. Oh yeah, one thing I need to mention is the fact that the formation I use is tied to the All-Star squad. The formations I use mainly consist of having 2 forwards. That's because the All-Star squad only selects 3. I'm not sure about the rest, but I'll put on the screen how many of each position they take. And when it comes to forwards, I like to have at least one player that's either going to be there purely as a bench/support player, or a player we're going to be developing for the future. So if I were to have a team which consisted of 3 forwards as the main starting squad, and 1 player on the bench, it guarantees at the least 1 player is going to miss out on the All-Star squad. So fielding 2, in my opinion at least, gives me the best opportunity for as many of my strikers to join the All-Star squad, while also having a backup to develop for the future. But overall, it is entirely your decision. You can field 3 forwards if you want to, if you have absolute belief that they are going to make the All-Star squad. That's absolutely fine. Just personally, I do like to play forwards in a position which specifically states that they are forwards, There are some scenarios where I do put midfielders in a forward position purely because I do believe they fit it better, but I won't officially change them to a forward purely because I always see them as a midfielder. But there are scenarios where you can just put a midfielder in the striker position instead. That's absolutely fine, you can still do that. Again, it is entirely up to you. However, there are two ways you can kinda cheat the system with the All-Star squad. The first one is kind of an odd event. It's the one where you get to be chosen to be the manager of the All-Star squad temporarily. It's weird in the fact that it doesn't have a specific trigger. There have been some save files where I've been chosen to take over the All-Star squad, and some where that's not happened at all. But in the scenario where you are chosen to be the manager of the All-Star squad, you go off against the team that's in the World Club Classic. During this time, you're allowed to change the team entirely, which means that you can just literally swap out every single player for all the players on your team, which gives all of those players the All-Star squad status, which is kind of dumb. I mean, realistically, you would just pick and choose the players out of any of the clubs, provided they have a good goal/assist record and have good stats. But it is entirely your choice. You can just field all of your players on the All-Star squad and give them all a boost by being on the All-Star squad. But it does mean you have to play a match with your players, so hopefully your players are good enough. Oh yeah, before I go on any further, the game doesn't mention a couple of things about the All-Star squad. One of them being that injured players can't be chosen to be in the All-Star squad, even if they've recently recovered or are about to recover. But because they're classed as injured during the selection process, they won't be chosen despite the fact that they're just about to recover next week. The game just doesn't allow it. Anyway, the second way to beat the All-Star squad is by swapping the players' positions around. In this case, I'll be swapping a couple of my forwards to the midfield position, but this also works if you swap them to either a defender or a goalkeeper. When you do this, the game will act as if they're currently acting as the position they're listed as. So for example, the game will see that you have a goalkeeper who's managed to score 5 goals and 10 assists, which is very impressive for a goalkeeper, and thus the game will choose them as a candidate for the All-Star squad. Ideally though, you should just field a team that would make the All-Star squad under normal conditions, which leads to the next point. As you play the game more and more, whether you're continuing on one save or starting again on another save file, you may notice some key players who you may seem more attached to. For me, my number one choice for goalkeeper will always be Salah. I always found their usefulness in goal compared to the low initial cost to purchase them an absolutely insane high value purchase. As expected, someone else might have a much preferred goalkeeper and may have found a better goalkeeper on their own save file, which is what I enjoy about the game. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all players, so I do find it really surprising when I do find a better player, which I can then use for future save files or this current save file. Also, you would start to realise which players you find an absolute nuisance and would start remembering which team they're on, just so you hope you don't go against them again. The best example of this would be Knight. This player will stick out for having one of the best stats and the highest costs in the game.
Captain!
Yeah?
Now, one great thing about Nintendo Pocket Football Club is the fact that the game doesn't keep the teams the exact same in every single game or save file. So, players like Knight can be in a completely different team in each save file. For example, in the current main series, Knight is playing for Paradox Athletic, a decent team with a tendency to emphasize more on defending than attacking under normal circumstances, but with Knight, they have a lot more pressure regarding the midfield. In other save files, you might find yourself in a much worse position. For example, the second save file I have, they have Knight placed in Bridgeford. Great. Normally the team that is on top of the league under normal circumstances, but with Knight is much more terrifying. And because of that, it means that every save file will have different circumstances which you will have to adapt to, which again you'd have to learn yourself. However, just like the sport is replicating, results aren't decided by the teams you field before the game, which emphasizes your ability to change a playstyle, whether it's formation, aggression, marking, etc. However, there are some scenarios where you have to change this up, purely because of a poor result the last time we faced them, or understanding that this team will always be a consistent problem for us, regardless of the stats of the players. Case in point, in the main series, Ridge Rangers seemingly just have an absolute knack to play against us. I'm not sure why, but it does force me to have to play differently against them. Another aspect of the game that I'd learned while playing was how to deal with teams that are just filled to the brim with players who have insane stats. For those of you who have played the game, almost all of you will know about Bridgeford United, or however they're translated in your respective languages, and they will pretty much always be the team that will be a problem for you. So, how did I deal with them? For the past couple of seasons, my save file version of Bridgeford have actually been struggling to even reach the top 2. I've already covered it in a YouTube short that I've made, but the bare bones of what the video was explaining was that when you buy a player from a different team, the AI just doesn't go ahead and replace the player. So whenever you buy a player that is quite useful to the team, they don't buy a replacement. Instead, they use whatever's on the bench. So in this save file, what I did to Bridgeford was essentially just robbery. I stole their left mid, and as characters in Inazuma 11 would say, ace striker, and ended up leaving their team with just the reserves of said positions. However, I never really expected the results to be this bad. However, it should be noted that this doesn't work as well against European Challenge Cup teams or World Cup Classic teams, mainly because the whole entire team is stacked. Not just the main squad, but also the reserves as well. But if there is a player that you do want to buy, it's still worth it to get that player and even slightly weaken the other team, regardless of how stacked they are. On top of that, something I found out while recording the series is that when you actually purchase a player and you decide you don't want them and release them, there actually is a chance that they don't return to the original team. Meaning, as I said before, where you can weaken a team by stealing a player and using them against them, you don't actually have to keep them. However, it's not concrete. Some players have returned to their original teams even if I've kept them for a couple of weeks. At this point in time though, I'm not entirely sure whether there's any conditions that need to be met before they go to a different team. But honestly, this was a fun aspect of the game I didn't really know about until around about season 14 of the original series. And it really is the equivalent of thinking outside the box in order to find a way to defeat a specific team. The game is that brutal in the first place, and learning tricks like this in order to beat out the top teams honestly feels quite satisfying. If there's anything else that you have discovered that I might not have, be sure to put them in the comments. I'll read them and I'll see whether I can apply them to my game. But these are the type of things that I'd learnt during the game and has helped with a lot of the success the club has had. And there's something nice about the fact that it really isn't easy to beat those teams, and in my opinion that really is the pinnacle of the game. It's simple, but it's not easy, just how football should be. Before we do reach the end, I do like to point out that I am aware that there is a mobile version of the game, which is exclusive to Japan. Some of the gameplay has been circling around Twitch. I think someone on the Discord showed me. I had a quick look at it. It does look quite interesting, but without going too far into the rabbit hole, look at the logo, it's a Shiba Inu. Anyway, now that I've wasted a decent amount of time, I'm not even sure how long this is. Honestly, I'm in the middle of a heat wave. My windows are closed because there's a lot of noise outside, and I'm so happy that I've finished all this recording. Hopefully I've convinced some of you of the merits of Nintendo's take on a football manager simulator, and if you have the ability to do so, honestly, try this game out. It is so fun. Just a friendly reminder that this game is only legitimately available in Japan and Europe eShops. You know, before they close. Not sure why America doesn't have it. I just guess they assumed they'd hate it. No idea. But honestly, just to let you know, I did initially start making the videos in order to showcase how good and fun this game can be, and I hope I have done that to you. If you click this video not knowing what this game is, or were interested in the game, I do hope to see some of you in the future. But for now, have a nice rest of the day, and goodbye.